It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome to an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That means that is Alan Saunders on his afternoon drive. Alan, how are we feeling?
Feeling good. The song still hits. I actually just had to, if you had been watching the box before, I had to physically turn it up. I was like, no, we need like 3 more notches there to get this really going. I'm ready now.
I hope that we can make it happen for our guy John too, to get it as his ringtone. That'd be pretty sick. Like, imagine you're just sitting there. Imagine, okay, you're in the press box, obviously, but like I'm outside tailgating or something like that, and all of a sudden somebody just walks by me while I'm tailgating, and I just hear the song because their phone's going off.
That would be incredible. That would be incredible.
And then they'd be, I assume that you got to have some type of ride to match it as well. Like we talked about the afternoon drives on here, the afternoon rides, which we still have pictures, by the way.
But yeah. So yesterday, just after we finished recording, I was not even home yet, and there was a red truck with a Steelers wrapped tailgate with that diamond plate pattern, and then the Steelers logo, and then some Steelers stuff, and the 6-time Super Bowl champs thing in the window. I was like, almost had a live one. We almost had one live on the show. It will happen at some point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One of these days, I'm just going to stop in the middle of a conversation, pull over to the side of the road, snatch the phone out of the holder, and be like, look! It's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I'm sending this to myself to be able to pull it up to show you guys the ride that Alan saw very shortly after finishing up recording here yesterday. But as I am doing that, Alan, we can dive in today's conversation. Going to answer some questions on today's show, going through the YouTube comments, as well as some questions that we get from X. But I want to start with YouTube because yesterday's episode dedicated a lot to conversation around James Daniels, right? The team not extending him. They're not looking to have a conversation about an extension this offseason leading up to the season. So they'll let him play out the last year of his contract and see where things go from there. But somebody in the YouTube comments was curious if this meant, could he be traded? This comes from Nelson Waters. I assume no Daniels deal means they'll trade him, ? And Alan, this wasn't even something that's on my radar. I don't necessarily think it's on the Steelers either, but I guess just because they aren't extending him, they did draft a guard last year, maybe we're just having a little bit of a conversation on the show about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any way they would even remotely entertain the thought of trading James Daniels. They want to win games this year. He's one of their best offensive linemen. He might be their best offensive lineman. He's certainly their most consistent offensive lineman. Playing James Daniels gives them the best chance to win games this year. They've done a million things this offseason with the intention of trying to win games this year. They're not going to make a move like that, which would make the team worse in 2024. Mm-hmm. And I think people get this twisted too. When there's no problem in letting a guy go as a free agent. The cap space that he will be opening up is valuable. That is fine. You don't need to get something for losing a guy. And in a league where you get compensatory draft picks for losing free agents, you really don't need to get you don't need to be worried about players walking in free agency. That is just fine as a normal course of business. So no, them not extending him does not make them at all likely to even remotely entertain a trade for James Daniels. I don't even think they would consider it. He's going to start at right guard almost all year. And I don't think that, I said this yesterday too, I don't think this means that Mason McCormick is the plan either. No one goes into the year with a 4th-round pick from an FCS school as oh yeah, that's our future starter. That's just not. You are drafting a 4th-round pick with the idea that they are going to be a backup if things go well. That's
yeah.
No one is drafting. Can it happen? Sure, we've seen it happen over and over again. But that is not anyone's intention with a 4th-round draft pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the same bucket. I didn't even cross my mind, like I said, but we got due diligence here. Nelson asked a question, thought it was worth bringing up on here, especially considering it was a topic that we just talked about yesterday. Speaking of conversations from YouTube, we'll go to Steve real quick here, who kind of tying into the same thing with spending money on the offensive side of the football. Steve says Steelers refuse to spend anything on offense. If they don't get a good number 2 wide receiver, they're not going to go anywhere. I'd like to know who is this anti-offense within the organization. If it's Tomlin, he needs ran off. You got to spend on offense to be a balanced team. This isn't 1970. Very impassioned here from Steve Pickering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Steelers are refusing to spend on offense. The Steelers had the most expensive offense in the NFL in 2018. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, like that. There's no refusal for the Steelers to spend on offense. They aren't not spending money on offense because they don't want to spend it on offense. They're not spending money on offense because they have an unsettled quarterback situation. They didn't really like the free agents that were out there. I don't blame them for not wanting to spend $100 million to get, Kirk Cousins, right? Like, where would they have spent the money on offense? They're rebuilding that side of the football. They're young on offense in most of the important places, and they're old on defense. Maybe not old, but at least older, right? All of their most experienced players are on defense, and all their best players are on defense, frankly. And it's not because they want it to be that way. It just is that way. And so, that's how it goes in cycles. It has nothing to do with the team's unwillingness to spend money on offense. They're retaining their best players. They signed Alex Highsmith. They signed Minkah Fitzpatrick. They signed T.J. Watt. They signed Cam Hayward. Those are the 4 best players on the team over the last 5 years. Like those are the guys you want to keep. And so they're, and if they don't sign Najee Harris or Pat Freiermuth, it won't be because they don't want to spend money on offense. It'll just be because they don't think those players are worth the dollar figure that they're going to get. There is no unwillingness to spend money on the offensive side of the ball. In fact, I think when you're going to see that this investment in the offensive line with 3 guys who were first and second round picks, it's going to mean you're going to see depressed salaries on the offense for a few years. But if these picks all pan out like we think they are, and they've got a couple of Pro Bowl offensive linemen out of those 3 guys in 4 or 5 years, they're going to have a very expensive offense, and that's okay. Like that's the way it works.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I'm glad that you kind of tied the draft in, because where they're not spending big dollar amounts, the high draft capital is being spent on the offense. So, like, if you wanted to reverse this question, you could say, well, they're not spending high draft picks so much on defense as of late. It's all gone to the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it works in cycles. They had a very expensive offense when they had Bell and Ben and AB, and they had a very veteran offensive line with Foster and Villanueva and Pouncey and the Castro. That was a very expensive offense, and this is a very expensive defense, and that's because that's where the best players on the team are. It's not because they won't spend money on offense. And I mean, look, I think they're looking for another wide receiver, and I think you can certainly criticize their seeming lack of action at that spot this offseason. And you can look at why weren't they more involved with wide receiver early in free agency? I think that's a very legitimate question. Why did they not make a move for someone somewhere at some point to be a replacement for Deontay Johnson? And if they weren't going to do that, why trade Deontay Johnson at all? Certainly, I think we all think more of the depth at the cornerback position in terms of young guys like Corey Trice and Darius Rush than I do Quez Watkins and Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller. And so I think you can certainly be critical of the approach at wide receiver and what appears to be a room that right now I would call not good enough. But it's not because of a unwillingness to spend money on offense from anyone in the organization. That's not a thing.
Yeah. I have a hard time understanding what the process was here at receiver. I talked to somebody that covers the league on a national level. I was having a conversation with them about it, just like, trying to find out if they had any info, any insight into the way that things were going down here. And like they said the same thing. Like it's just weird. They showed interest to some degree in Tyler Boyd right away in free agency tampering. Wanted to bring Mike Williams here for a visit. He never got out of New York, but it's been like radio silent in terms of free agency since then. It's all been about like guys on the trade market, and maybe something does still come to fruition. But yeah, like if you're having interest in those two guys, like nobody else, not that it was a great wide receiver free agent market, but like nobody else haven't been connected anywhere else really since those guys came off the board.
Yeah, and then drafted Roman Wilson, and really I think nothing has happened since the draft. I mean, maybe they're waiting for a June 1st kind of thing. Maybe they have an iron in the fire that they're just being patient on, but I don't know. It seems very strange to me. There's not a clear thread line of a plan. You know, it's not obvious what the idea is, and so sure, I think you'd be critical of the wide receiver depth, the talent opposite George Pickens, specifically guys that can play outside, and they will spend money on offense when they have players on offense that they want to spend money on, and right now they do not and have not. If you know, we get out here and Justin Fields is an all-pro, they're going to spend $150 million to keep him like that. And so, and actually, you know, somebody in the comments also said like maybe they're waiting in regard to James Daniels about see how all these guys look in this offense. And I mean, they do have a lot of future money available, but the uncertainty at the quarterback position, certainly, I think, you know, maybe that, and I wish I had read that before I read the name before I got in the car, but you know, I think there's a point to be made there where like with a certain level of uncertainty at the quarterback position, I think it does make some sense for the Steelers to kind of not lock themselves into a whole lot this offseason that they don't have to. You know, if you're worried about needing to spend a lot of money on quarterback this coming offseason, the 2025 offseason, then, you know, maybe you can try to float at the guard position for a year. You know, like I think that does make some sense, right? Where it's like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen to quarterback. You know, maybe we'll just take it easy on signing these other guys for right now and see what happens. Maybe that whole list of guys we talked about yesterday turns out to be nobody because the team is just going to wait and see a quarterback. I still think you're making moves. You're making space with Alex Highsmith to do something, right? If it wasn't wide receiver or it wasn't to sign an extension, like you're making that cap space for some reason. But maybe there will not be to use our word of the day yesterday, bonanza of contract extensions handed out until they see what they see at quarterback.
You had sent in our Steelers Now group something. I just thought of it as we were talking about receivers. The Giants added incentives, and this is a name that we had kind of talked about in terms of a receiver trade. Giants added incentives to Darius Slayton's contract. Do we know any more about what those are? Like, does that mean that he's for sure staying with the Giants now?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that means that he's going to stay in New York at this point. So,
he joined them at OTAs. Okay.
I think you can pretty safely cross that one off the list at this point.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just happened to see that and was curious. So, kind of of that same vein, you know, we're talking about Omar, we're talking about the receiver thing. That is definitely a fair criticism to come out of this offseason. But Faustino just recently tweeted at us and said, "Hey, friends, why does Omar Khan appear to be viewed as a polarizing GM? Been seeing the stories lately about him being ranked low compared to other GMs. Don't understand why when you look at the last two off seasons."
I don't know that I would characterize him as polarizing. I did see a ranking from, I believe it was NBC Sports, that he was ranked low. I would just simply call that ranking wrong. I would not say it's polarizing. I would say that someone did a poor job of ranking general managers. Maybe it's just someone who puts a significant value on experience and length of time in the job. But I would not say that Omar Khan has done a bad job of anything, and I certainly would not rank him lowly among the NFL GMs right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in full agreement. I do like reading the excerpt from that. And again, I don't even remember where it was from. Maybe it was from there. It kind of said the same thing. Like, you know, look at the post Colbert era so far. They like the moves he made. But they still got to figure out, like, do they have an answer at quarterback? If not, once they figure out, you'll be able to really tell what the body of work there is. Just a couple seasons to go based off of right now.
Yeah,
I want to ask you.
Look, we can evaluate the process, but it's probably still too early to say that like all these draft picks that have been very well regarded. Like we don't really know. I mean, Broderick Jones, I think he's great, but maybe won't be. There's plenty of uncertainty when you're only talking about a year and a half to go on.
Sure. Yeah, I want to ask you something that actually Nick and I got asked about the episode that he was on this week. It came from somebody on YouTube. I think it was a Bird Sports fan, a regular commenter. But they were asking, we typically hear about people say, they cover the team, say Tomlin really you see him shine at training camp. That's when you can see him kind of do his thing. But is there anything that you take away from OTAs with Tomlin's coaching style that kind of like put his prints on the team before we get to that period?
Yeah, man. It's much more, I feel like you get two people when you deal with Mike Tomlin. You have like Mike, and then you have like Coach Tomlin, like the guy with the sound bites and the gifable facial expressions and like that. I think Mike comes out at OTAs where it is much more about building relationships with guys individually. You see him when they're doing stretches, come over, start a conversation with a guy. I was walking through the locker room today, and he was sitting down in a chair in the locker room and sitting next to Isaac Seumalo. And I don't even know what they were talking about, but like I was talking to Dylan Cook, who's like 3 lockers over. And as their conversation, was wrapping up, Mike was kind of walking towards me, and as he said, he was talking to Isaac, he's like, just chew on that over the weekend and let me know what you think. And it's like this guy is going to the Hall of Fame, and he's going to his offensive lineman and saying, hey, think about this and let me know what you think is best. I think that's a side of Mike Tomlin that the public doesn't really get to see very often. He does have very personal relationships with all the players. And it's funny, too, because even if we ask him about guys, the public message is for public consumption, and that's not always the private message. I can remember there was a guy who the Steelers signed like late in training camp. I might have told this story before. Signed like the 3rd week of training camp, and Mike talks every day at training camp, and somebody asked him, "Oh, why'd you sign this guy?" And Tomlin's response was like, "Who? Like why are you asking me about this irrelevant part of our team?" And not the same guy, but I did an interview with a player, a couple of years after that. It was a very similar circumstance where this guy had only like the thinnest grasp of being a Pittsburgh Steeler. Was on the team for a few weeks, or was on the practice squad for a week, something like that. And he told me, he's like, when I got cut, Mike Tomlin sat down with me for like 45 minutes and told me like all the reasons I got cut, what I needed to do differently to be better, how I needed to fix my career. He's like, that guy changed my life, and I was on the team for a week. And it was like, yeah, the public message is, who the hell is this guy? And like, why does he matter? Like, don't ask me about him. But privately, like, he was more than willing to give his time to someone like that, even though it had no benefit to his team whatsoever. And so I think that's the part of Mike T I see at OTAs, the more relationship building side. And certainly he enjoys the competition aspect as well. You see him out there at 7 shots, keeping score and making sure that the winners and losers know who are the winners and losers every day. That's always fun.
That's pretty much what Nick's answer. And Nick said he sees a lot. Like, this is more about the assistant coaches, like everybody else on the staff, more so than Tomlin, from like the coaching and really digging their heels in perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, I want to mention too, I don't know if this was the comment that you were talking about.
While we're on that question, we had a question about Mike Sullivan. So we can get to that too. But go ahead with what you're saying.
Well, so friend of the show, always commenting, always saying great things about us, which is the best way to get our attention. Chris,
that is the best way to get on the show.
Yes. about yesterday's show, he said, "Great drive as always. Just got to watch this AM." I agree that the market trend is definitely a deciding factor in the news with James Daniels. Would think drafting Mason McCormick, and also I didn't think about this, but Spencer Anderson, no longer really working at tackle, just as an interior guy, gives them a succession plan. Also, Herbig could be brought back much cheaper than Daniels, obviously, and also think drafting 2 offensive tackles back to back high could be an indication that that's where the offensive line money will go down the road.
Yeah, I get the sense that the Steelers are probably not super excited about playing in the guard free agent market at the prices that we saw this offseason. I mean, James Daniels is a really good player, and he got 3 years, like 26 and a half. And now you're talking about guys getting like 480, 100.
Yeah.
Man, like that's a crazy increase. And so you can't spend all the money everywhere. I don't like back to the previous conversation. I don't think it's a thing about not spending money on offense. I'm just not sure interior offensive line is where you want to spend that money. I also think there's something to be said for when you're rebuilding a position group. Like, you kind of, it makes sense. Like, if you're going to have young linemen, just put a bunch of them together. Like, you want to build that group that can stick together for 3, 4, 5 years and put them. I mean, James Daniels is still 27. He's not that old. But I can see the idea of the team wanting to just totally remake that position group and keep that rebuild going. We'll see. We'll see how things go with Mason McCormick. Spencer Anderson certainly could be an option. Like, I was a little skeptical of him, seeing playing time at tackle. I think he's a lot better suited to guard. Dylan Cook, by the way, worked as the extra tight end today. The old nipple rubber, as Randy Figner so famously dubbed. I guess that was Zach Banner at the time. But interesting, big athlete, was a quarterback in college. Certainly seems like he kind of fits the bill there. And he's a guy that I think the Steelers have something in Dylan Cook. I think he's an NFL player. I don't think he's just a scrub. Like, I think they found something there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get to see him on a daily basis, but just from things that I've seen, things that I've heard, watching him work a little bit last year, I agree. So I'm interested to see how he continues to progress here. The comment that you were talking about, though, came from King Duck. So thank you to Devlin Hodges for checking out the channel here. Said, is Mike Sullivan there, and what is his role?
Pittsburgh Penguins head coach Mike Sullivan, I have not seen at OTAs yet this year. Although, this is usually the time of the year where just random minor celebrities from around the world do check in, actors. And I think, Glorilla came last year, and, some comedian that I don't even really remember.
Matt Rife. Matt Rife was there.
There you go. Yeah. So, I'm not ruling it out. Steelers, a former quarterbacks coach, now senior offensive assistant Mike Sullivan, is there. He's mostly been working with the wide receivers, him and Zach Azzani. It seems like they're kind of divided up that offensive staff, where you've got the 2 quarterbacks coaches, Arth and Baker, working with that unit, and you've got the 3 offensive line guys. And Pat Meyer and Williams, and the other guy that came over with Arthur Smith from Atlanta. And then it seems like, you got Sullivan kind of with the wide receivers, and blanking on the last offensive assistant, but he's been with Alfredo Robertson tight ends. So, DY, Derry Young. And so they kind of split them up. Ryan Shazier has been working with Eddie Faulkner at the running back position. So I had somebody ask me this on Twitter the other day, as opposed to video. I mean, Ryan Shazier and Vince Williams have both been coaching throughout OTAs. I don't know that I would call them coaches per se at this point, but they've been around, and it seems like a regular part of the group there. So a couple of former Steelers back in black and gold there. But yeah, that's kind of been the way things have been divided up.
Okay. Yeah. Does he have an official title, Mike Sullivan, that is? with the team?
Yeah, I believe he's senior offensive assistant. I believe that
Okay.
is his title.
Okay. It's interesting just to me that, like, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but like when they were bringing in somebody else to be quarterback coach, I would have thought that was just like the end of his tenure. But it's interesting that they've, found a role for him to stick around. I will say, we talked about last year how things could have gone a lot worse for them post Matt Canada, and they kept things afloat. So that's probably, some credence there.
I wondered if he might, because he was he was like in the recruiting side of things when he was at Army. I wondered if he might do some kind of like proto scouting kind of role. So we'll see when we get into the regular season, or maybe like he might run the scout team and see that as something that he can do as well. So we'll see what he does when we get in closer to the regular season. But for now, he's working with the wide receivers.
There we go. Alan, I know you wanted to bring up the question of the day that you got to ask Dean Lowry.
Dude. I don't hit home runs often in the locker room. And obviously yesterday was big news when I talked to James Daniels. Today, we didn't go big news. We went for controversy in my conversation with Dean Lowry. Very nice man. It was the first time I got to meet him. 8-year vet. And so Dean Lowry, native of Chicago, Illinois. And in speaking with Dean Lowry, I feel like he is one of the most Chicago people I've ever, like, he looks like he just stepped off the set of The Bear when you meet him. He's just, that is who Dean Lowry is. He's probably got like a sport pepper tattoo or something. But I really like it. So I asked him, as a native of Chicago, which I think everyone can agree is sort of the quintessential Midwestern place, and a guy who played in Green Bay and Minnesota, is Pittsburgh in the Midwest? Because this is a topic, if you are on X, you will know.
Yeah.
Like wildfire, every 3 months comes and goes, where people will just argue whether Pittsburgh is in the Midwest. And I went to a Midwest expert to find out the answer.
Yep. So here's a little bit of that clip.
From Chicago. You've played in Green Bay and Minnesota. I would say all of that is the Midwest. Is Pittsburgh the Midwest?
That's a great question. I had some college buddies at Northwestern who were from Pittsburgh, from Upper St. Clair, and they asked me that. I would say the people are more Midwest, I feel like, but the way the city is kind of set up, it feels a little more East Coast and everything, but the people are more Midwest. Just very nice, very caring. They love sports, and just I definitely feel at home here in Pittsburgh. So that's a great question.
That was a veteran cop-out answer of playing both sides. Both sides of it. I really appreciate that.
That's fun to talk about, and I've joked about that. I've been in the Midwest my whole life, and this is still kind of like on the border of Midwest, so it still feels good. But it's cool to, I guess, get out of the NFC North and not be in the AFC North and kind of experience some new rivalries and a new just kind of team tradition here. So it's cool to get.
There it is. And I think he's right. The people are.
I think he brings a new layer to the discussion. And that this is, of course, a podcast about football. In football terms, I feel like Pittsburgh is Midwest is football. Like if you think about the roots of football are Midwestern. Professional football. Like the oldest teams, the league was founded in Canton. The first professional football game and player were both in Pittsburgh. The oldest teams are Green Bay and Detroit, and the teams with the longest history are Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and you throw in the New York Giants, but Chicago Bears, and that's I do feel like from a football standpoint, Pittsburgh sure has a heck of a lot more in common with Cleveland and Chicago and Green Bay and Minnesota than Philly or Washington or New York. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But I would lump Buffalo in with our group too, which really, because you can't say Buffalo's in the Midwest, right? Like you just can't.
No.
So it just continues to conflate the issue.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is not in the Midwest. I just need to state this definitively.
I feel like we need different maps depending on what the topic is.
As a former geography major,
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is not in the Midwest. Ohio is the Midwest. Pittsburgh is not. We are not East Coast either. We are something else.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about
Now,
this now, though. Like, we need different maps.
You can say we're in the Rust Belt, but the Rust Belt is an economic region, and it is not continuous, right? Like, Scranton is in the Rust Belt, 80 miles from New York City. Like, you know, there are places in the Rust Belt places in Connecticut that I would say are in the Rust Belt. And so that's a different thing. We're certainly in that. We are absolutely part of Appalachia, although that is not a region that contains any other major cities. So it becomes difficult to categorize. I prefer the term Mid-East instead of Midwest.
Okay.
If I was going to say Mid-East, I would say, you know, places like Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. You could say Cleveland, you know, that is our region that is pretty unique to this area. It's not really like the Midwest. I don't know how you can go to a city with the incline and say, oh yeah, this is just like Nebraska. You know, like it's not, we're not the same. And we have major differences. But I can see it from a football perspective where I think Pittsburgh and the Steelers and Steelers fans sure have a lot in common with the cities and the teams and the traditions in places like Minnesota, Chicago, Green Bay, Detroit.
Yes.
Like that feels a lot like what we have.
Absolutely. And I appreciate Dean Lowry's answer. And you know, didn't know a lot about him, but I'm already a fan now.
I'm a big fan of Dean Lowry. Did not know a lot about him until we talked today. I think he's going to fit in just fine here in the not Midwest.
You talked to the podcasting QB as well today, right?
I did. Kyle Allen, yes. We had a good conversation about his podcast, which is called The Quarterback Room, and you know, why he wanted to do it. And he said, you know, he wanted to talk about what quarterbacks really talk about. He said the quarterback room is so interesting. There's always like conversation and banter. Sometimes it's about football and like very inane X's and O's details and arguments about, you know, what to do in this situation versus this situation. And sometimes it's like, you know, talking about golf and cars and whatever. And he wanted to try to capture that and take it to the public. And so he's not doing as much right now, obviously with him at OTAs, but he does it with Jesse Palmer, and gonna shoot for some crossover there. We're gonna see if we can make that happen. Get Kyle Allen on the old.
That'd be awesome. I watched their podcast, so yeah, I'm a fan.
And me too.
I got this pulled up, by the way. So here's the vehicle that Allen saw immediately after recording Steelers Afternoon.
It was literally actually almost like 100 yards from where I am right now. There you go. There you go. I'm not sure in our 0 to 6 scale. I think this is probably like a 1.
Yeah.
1.5.
Even though it literally says 6 times, like they're trying to, I feel like, steal the Super Bowls from us with the.
I do really like the using the diamond plate motif. Like the Steelers should totally have like an alternate uniform with those or something.
Yeah.
Right? Like that would be such a good, and like I'm generally a uniform classicist. You know, like some of those uniforms have like this sort of sublimated pattern on the numbers where it's like you can't really even see it on TV. You kind of have to be holding it up close to even notice. Like that on the color rush jerseys would be, I'd be all for that. Like if the gold in the color rush jerseys had that pattern in it that you could really only catch it from close range, I think that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, might have to have somebody that's much more talented than myself kind of mock that up and see what that would look like. Maybe pass it along to the Steelers, give them some ideas as well.
There you go.
All right, good stuff as always. Alan, tell the people where they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that bell for notifications, all kinds of stuff still coming from the final week of OTAs. Send us your Steelers afternoon rides. We love your Steelers decorated vehicles. We will break them down here on the podcast if you have one, whether it's a collection of bumper stickers or you have had players autograph your Hummer and you laminated over them to keep them forever, like our dear friend from last season. We want to see them. And if yours looks exactly like our little logo there. And hey, people wanted the merch. So we got strong responses for the merch. We got to make that happen. I do have a ton of stickers. We got to find a way to distribute them that does not involve me writing out by hand 1 million envelopes. We need I don't know what. Maybe we'll give them. Maybe I'll just try to keep a bunch of them on me at training camp, and people can come claim your sticker or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I know how I'm going to get rid of the box of mine that you brought me when you gave me my Christmas gift. I'm going to the home opener this year. I'm just going to have that box with me and just be passing them out to people.
I might take a bunch. I might take a bunch of training camp. Maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe I'll give them away at training camp.
I feel like that is a sound idea.
And if the people want shirts, we'll make it happen. Or hats, maybe hats.
Okay. Yeah, I would love the hat too. I mean, I love both of them. The shirts, I 100% would be able to do. The hats, probably would have to find somebody else than the person I'm thinking, but you can make it happen.
All right, I'm in on this project. We'll have to see what we can do this offseason.
There we go. But I will say what we need to have happen, if you really, really want this to happen, is everybody that's watching this right now needs to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and continue to hit us in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking of. Shirts, hoodies, hats. Is there anything that we're not thinking of that you would like to see? Of course, the stickers that Alan and I will both have on hand when you see us as we get towards the season here. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the Afternoon Drive over there as well. You can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.